Hi bestie, how are you today? I hope you're having a fantastic day. Thank you so much for stopping by. I am so happy you made it. I went on an independent bookstore crawl with my mom for my birthday. We went to 23 bookstores in 5 days, drove over 1,000 miles, and got 38 books. So I wanted to tell you about the bookstore, show you the books I got, and yeah, let's just get into it. So on day one, my mom flew into town and we immediately started driving to Jacksonville, Florida. There was a bookstore that I really wanted to go in Jacksonville. It's called Femfire Books. They were closed on Mondays and Tuesdays, so we didn't get to go there. But we ended up going to the first bookstore, which was Happy Medium Books Cafe. It was a bookstore in the front half, and in the back half was a cafe with places to sit, and there were people there on their computers or reading. It was very, very cute. It was Tuesday and they do $2 Tuesdays, so all of the drinks in their cafe were $2. My mom got a lavender iced latte. She said it was really good. They also had a Crescent City gift set here that I had not seen at another bookstore before, which is really cool. I'm not really super into Crescent City, but if you know somebody who is, this would be a great gift. This bookstore had mostly new books with some used book options. I found Leather and Lark at this bookstore. I was on the hunt for this one when we were on this bookstore crawl. I was like, I need to get Leather and Lark because I loved Butcher and Blackbird so much. After that, we went next door to the antique shop and it was really cute in there. There was so much stuff to see, but we didn't end up getting anything at the antique shop. We just kept it rolling and started driving towards Ferdinanda Beach in Florida. This was technically on our way between Jacksonville and Savannah. This brings us to the next bookstore, which is Loft Bookstore. So Loft Bookstore was located in a downtown area on Ferdinanda Beach. Super, super cute surrounding area. A lot of these bookstores had like very cute areas around them. But there was like a little ice cream shop and a pub and just a lot of cute places to get stuff to eat, things to do, all that sort of jazz. So this was a 2-story bookstore. The first floor was all new releases. I will say this because I'll bring it up for almost every other bookstore. A lot of the bookstores did not have a romance section, or their romance was just like mixed in with their fiction. So as a romance reader, that was just a little difficult to find something to read. Mind you, I still managed to find 38 books that I wanted to read, but it made it a little bit more difficult because either the books were the super popular book talk books in the romance section, or they had no romance section. The second floor of this bookstore had a little history either of the area or the bookstore itself. I didn't really stop too long up there. And then they also had a used book section upstairs. And then they had tables which looked like they were for book club meetings. I did not end up getting anything at this bookstore, so we moved on to Savannah. I think of the 23 bookstores, there was only 3 that I didn't get something at. So this next one is one of them. We stayed the night in Savannah for night 1. And then the next morning we went to breakfast and then the Book Lady bookstore in Savannah, Georgia. The outside of this bookstore was adorable. They had these cute little booths over the entrance that had flowers growing in them, which I loved. So then you walk in and they had a ladder that had books stacked on it. They had so many books for the amount of space that they had. This was mostly like political books, historical books, rare books. So it was like you have to ask somebody who works there before you touch it kind of books. There was also a staircase that was just stacked with so many books. There was not a lot of new book options at this bookstore. It was mostly used books and rare books. And this is the first bookstore that we went into that I walked up to the person working there and was like, hey, so where's your romance section? And she was like, yeah, we don't have that. And I was like, okay, that's fine. And then all of their sci-fi fantasy section didn't have anything that I was super interested in. So we just kept it moving to the next bookstore. The next bookstore was only like 2 blocks away from this one, so we just walked there. This is Booksellers in Savannah, Georgia. This bookstore is way bigger on the inside than it looks on the outside. It said on the floor that the building was built in 1843. There was a lot of parts where you had to like watch your step, but this had so many different nooks and crannies that they had books in, and there were books on every square inch possible. Right when you walk in on the left, there is a section for staff picks, and they have a lot of staff apparently because there were so many staff picks. I love to see that. And then if you kept going to the left, there were puzzles and games and other things like that. Not a whole lot of books to the left, but if you kept going straight, that's when it really just opened up into this crazy amount of books. As you start walking straight, they did have a section on the right that was like a Life's Better in Pink section that of course caught my eye, and it just had a bunch of pink books, which how can you not love that? Something I really loved about this bookstore and did not see at any other bookstore was on the shelf they had these little cards that told you the order of the series that were on the shelves. So for example, for Bridgerton, it was like, okay, book 1 is The Duke and I, all the way through book 8, so you don't have to wonder, is this the first book? What number is this? Kind of thing. I did go over to the fantasy section and notice that they had an order for Throne of Glass. They had the publication order listed for that, and I did not read in publication order, so I was just like, It's really just up to how you want to read it, but I just thought it was interesting that they did have one posted for Throne of Glass. There were 4 cats inside just roaming around, having a good time. They were so adorable. One of my favorite things about this bookstore though was that they had a typewriter in the corner and you could type something on it and then stick it to the wall. I didn't type anything, but this was just such a cute thing to go look around and see what everybody was saying. They also had really cute tote bag options in this bookstore. My mom got me The Future is Indie. I hope that focuses. Isn't that so cute though? It says the future is indie, shop indie bookstores. And that's exactly what we were doing. I don't know if I said this earlier, but my mom bought me all of the books that I will be talking about in this video as my birthday gift. I have the best mom in the entire universe. Hi mom, I know you're watching, but I'm so happy that I got to spend this time with my mom, and like we're gonna make it an annual thing, which I'm so excited about. But yeah, I just needed to give a little shout out to her because she's so lovely. So my mom got me the tote bag, and then she got me Shadows of the Lost. If you want a little bit more detail on all of the books that I got for my birthday, there is a separate birthday book haul that you can go watch. We spent so much time in that bookstore. It was definitely my favorite in Savannah. Before we left for Charleston, we stopped in the Stacks Bookstore, which right when you walk in, when you turn around and look up, they have books that are like painted to look like they spell out stacks. I'll show you what I'm talking about, but I thought that was such a cute touch. I also love that right behind the register, there was a painting on the wall that said "You belong in the stacks," which was just so beautiful. There were a lot of options in this bookstore, which I loved. They did have a romance section at this bookstore. I ended up getting Jade City for a book club I will be attending in Tampa, but they did have a romance section, so I did check that out. They had these Fourth Wing gift sets like they did for the Crescent City ones at Happy Medium Book Cafe. They had book-themed teas, which was such a cool touch that I had not seen at another bookstore before, and I'm pretty sure I didn't see at a bookstore after this. They also had author candles, which I just loved. If you were in Savannah, I would definitely recommend all 3 of these bookstores. Then we drove from Savannah to Charleston, and we got to our first stop in Charleston, which was Itinerant Literate Bookstore. First thing, right off the bat, you walk in, you are greeted by the cutest little corgi. It was so sweet. This was a very cozy bookstore, and I liked that it wasn't overwhelming. Like, I was satisfied with the amount of options that I had, and I wasn't feeling like I couldn't find something for me, but I also wasn't completely overwhelmed by the amount of books that they had. They had a couple blind date with the book options here. And they did have, I really liked that they paired up with a local restaurant to do their book club and host it over there, and you can get tickets. That was a really cool touch. They also had signed copies at this bookstore, and I noticed that the girl behind the register was editing a book. I just thought that that was so cool. I ended up getting 2 books here, which was The Devil in Blue Jeans and Romancing Miss Stone. Also, all of the books that I'm talking about are in the book haul video, so I will make sure to link that in the description. Next up in Charleston was Buxton Books. The outside of this bookstore was gorgeous. This was also a really good sized bookstore in the way that you're not going to be overwhelmed by the options. They did not have a romance section, but that's okay, I'll forgive them. I will say this, right when you walk in on the left, there is a blind date with a book cart that I completely missed when we walked in, and I didn't see till we were leaving. So I didn't get to stop and take a good look at it. But if you're going, make sure to check out the blind date with the book cart. They did have quite a few signed copies here as well. The staff was very nice, and I ended up getting Summer Romance by Annabelle Monaghan. It was a signed copy that they had, so of course, if a bookstore had signed copies, I really tried to get a signed copy of a book that I probably would already like, but I wasn't gonna get a signed copy for the sake of getting a signed copy, you know? Last stop in Charleston was Blue Bicycle Books, and they had the cutest bike outside with a stack of books on it, which I was just like, okay, I know I'm in the right place now. Right when you walk in, the whole front room is mostly books by local authors or about Charleston. So I was like, okay, well, I don't really think that I'm gonna buy something here, but I'll still look around. But this bookstore goes far back. You really, really need to spend time at this bookstore, because I, just from the first glance, was like, oh, I probably won't get anything here. But I kept walking, and they have a really long hallway with 3 rooms off of that hallway to the right. Each room has something different, like some different genre. And then if you keep going all the way to the end, there is a young adult section. Again, this bookstore had no romance section, so I was checking out the young adult section at this bookstore. I ended up getting 3 Dark Crowns, which is about 3 sisters that are fighting for the throne. And it just, I have 3 girl cousins, so it just reminded me of my cousins, and I was like, oh, I wonder who would win. So I just thought that it'd be a fun read, and I'm very excited to get into that one. So we stayed the night in Charleston, and then the next morning we woke up, had breakfast, went and got pedicures, which was so much fun, and then we continued on to Asheville. On our way to Asheville, we stopped in Greenville, South Carolina, and this was both my favorite bookstore and my mom's favorite bookstore of the 23 that we went to. This is Judson Booksellers in Greenville, South Carolina. If I could only recommend that you go to one of these bookstores, it's this one. I loved it. First of all, the area around the bookstore was absolutely gorgeous. So many restaurants and stores to go into, so it's not like you're just going there for the bookstore. There's a lot of stuff around it. It was absolutely stunning on the outside, but just as stunning on the inside. So right when you walk in, there is a section for people to sit and be on their laptops or whatever, just a place to sit, enjoy your stuff from the cafe, have a good old time. And then if you keep walking in, on the left and on the right, they had these half walls that were made up of books, but not painted books or just the book spines. It was the entire book was part of the wall. It was so, so cool. And then there was a cute calendar behind the register with all the upcoming events. They did have a book here that I wish that I got. It was 150 bookstores to visit before you die. And that bookstore, Judson Booksellers, was on the list. Another bookstore that I've been to was on it, but I didn't look through all 150, but I need to get that book. We spent a lot of time in this bookstore. The cafe is on the right when you walk in, and they had this like old-timey oven underneath the display case for the pastries, and also they had books in the display case to hold up the different like levels of stuff in the bakery. I thought that was a great touch. This bookstore probably had the largest blind date with a book area. They had so many blind date with a book options here. They also had those board games that look like books. I need to start collecting those because those are so freaking cute. They had so many options at this bookstore. It was a little overwhelming, but I kind of loved it. And they had a lot of notes from the staff about the different books, which I always love to see that. There was no specific romance section at this bookstore, but they did have a lot of romance options in their fiction. I ended up getting The North Wind at this bookstore. Next stop on our way to Asheville was As the Page Turns in Travelers Rest, North Carolina. So this was a new and used bookstore. It was mostly a used bookstore with a small new section. And so they had an erotica section, and I was like, I wonder what's in the erotica section. So I'm looking, and I'm just looking at all these books like, I don't consider any of these books erotica. So I'm gonna show you what they thought erotica was. They also had a lot of Christian books in there, so I was like, okay, maybe that's why. But you tell me in the comments if you think that these books classify as erotica. This bookstore also, when you're looking at it from the front, like when you're standing at the front door, does not look super large, but like there's the register and then there's a door to the left of the register. There's like a hallway to the left of the register. And if you go back there, there's so many used books back there. They had an entire room of just paranormal books. And then they had a whole room for Christian fiction. I didn't go in there, but if you kept going, they had a lot of romance at this bookstore, which you know I love. They had this really beautiful edition of the Harry Potter books. I have never read these books, but I was so close to wanting to get this series, but they only had 3 through 7. I'm gonna show you. I really thought that these were just stunning. I honestly wish that I had more time to spend in this bookstore because I feel like you could really find some gems in here if you had the time and the patience to look through all of the books. I got 3 books at this bookstore. Shout out to my mother again. Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez, Fake Dates and Mooncakes, and then Pride and Prejudice because I have never read it before. This bookstore also had a staff pick section, which I really love to see. I want to know what the staff is reading. So that wrapped up that day. We stayed in Asheville for the night and then woke up and went to Malaprop's bookstore in Asheville, North Carolina. There were 2 other bookstores that we wanted to go to in Asheville, but they didn't open until 12 and 1, I think. And it was 10, so we had places to be, people to see, things to do. We couldn't stay for those 2 bookstores, but we went to Malaprop's bookstore. I will say the lighting in this bookstore was way more cozy than any of the other bookstores. It was a lot of yellow lighting instead of harsh white lighting, and it wasn't super late in the day, so the sun wasn't coming through the window yet. They had merch like t-shirts and cups with their logos on it, and then they also had a wall of signed books. There were so many options. They also had a full romance and erotica section. Again, a lot of the books I would not consider erotica, but just the spicy book talk books were in the erotica section. They also had a pretty large fantasy and sci-fi area, and they did have some blind date with the book options here. This one was also located in a really cute downtown area where there was a lot of stuff to do around it. And there were 2 bookstores that are, I'm pretty sure, like a couple blocks away. Like you could have walked to the other 2. They just weren't open yet. I got a signed copy of Flock by Kate Stewart at this bookstore, and my mom got The Princess Bride. She loves that movie, has not read the book before, so I'm sure she's so excited for that. So we started driving towards Athens, Georgia, and my mom was like, well, what if there's some bookstores on the way? So I looked it up and we found a couple of bookstores in the cutest little mountain towns. So the first one was City Lights Bookstore in Sylva, North Carolina. It was just straight out of a small town romance. We passed by we passed by a huge apple tree on our walk up to the bookstore, and I was just like, am I the main character? So this was just a really, really cute mountain town, like small town to a T. So for this bookstore, it is 2 stories. It is a bookstore upstairs and a cafe downstairs. So we walked into the bookstore portion, and right when you walk in, they had cookbooks, stuff by local authors, local interest stuff when you walk in to the left. And then to the right was more of their new releases in fiction, and then they had a small romance section and then sci-fi, fantasy, that kind of thing. Mystery thriller. I'm just not a mystery thriller kind of gal. So I'm looking at fantasy and romance when I go into bookstores. I almost forgot to mention they did have a black cat in this bookstore, and it was so cute, and I just loved it. I just wanted to take it home. And this was the same thing as a lot of the other bookstores that had used books. It's the newer books in the front, and then when you go into the back section, walls and walls of used books. They also had a wall of bookmarks from indie bookstores, which I thought was so unique. I had not seen anything like it and still have not seen anything like it at the other bookstores, but I loved that they had a collection of indie bookstore bookmarks. They also offered items by local artists at this bookstore. So there were crocheted scarves and they had wooden bookmarks, which I thought was just such a cool touch and just really gives into that small town energy. I ended up getting 3 books at this bookstore, The Stand-In, and then 2 cowboy romances, Matthew and Brody. But then next on our journey was a Novel Escape bookstore in Franklin, North Carolina. This bookstore was basically 2 storefronts worth of space. I really felt though like they didn't have a lot of books on the shelves for having 2 storefronts worth of space. So you walk in the door and it goes all the way back like a normal storefront, but then there's a door or an opening to the next one over that they also own that they had books in there too. So they had new and used books at this bookstore, but mostly new. Something that really made me laugh at this bookstore was their blind date with a book section said that the blind date with a book would be safer than dinner with a stranger. They did have a romance section at this bookstore. I got the 7 Rules for Breaking Hearts at this one. Next stop was Hullabaloo Books in Clayton, Georgia. This one was hard to find because it is located underneath the Wander Shop in Clayton, Georgia. But from the outside, it just says the Wander Shop. So you go in and then there's a set of stairs that takes you down to the bookstore. This was the perfect size bookstore. You could see everything from the entrance and it wasn't overwhelming with the options that you had. They did have a spicy book talk table. Can somebody tell me if the Lore Olympus series, is that spicy? I didn't know, but it was on the spicy book talk table. They also had the board games that look like books at this bookstore, but I had to stop myself. Just remind myself, I don't need it. We ended up getting a Myrtle book for my grandma. I don't know if you've seen, they have an app for it, but it's like trying to figure out who done it with the clues that they give you, and it's like a little chart and you have to check off who could possibly be the suspects. I think she's gonna love it. My grandma is a true crime gal, so I really think that she's gonna love this one. And then my mom got me Electric Idol by Katie Robert. I read Neon Gods and I liked it, so I'm excited to read the next one. Continuing on our drive, we ended up in Athens, Georgia at Avid Bookshop. I'm pretty sure they just got there or they're renovating or something, but they had a lot of shelves that were empty in here. So the options that they had were pretty limited. They did have a used book section, but there weren't a lot of options in the used book sections. I really feel like they just got there or they just moved or something. But with that being said, they did have a lot of options out for Pride Month, which I loved. I ended up getting A Nobleman's Guide to Seducing a Scoundrel. They did have a romance section at this bookstore. Can't complain about that. They had books by local authors and signed copies. I really love when indie bookstores are supporting local authors. It is so special. Like, they need to keep doing that. And we told the owner about the bookstore crawl, which she was like, that sounds so amazing, and then recommended a bookstore in Gainesville to go to. So now I have to go to that bookstore. I mean, I don't make the rules. She recommended it, I have to go. Next stop was Walls of Books in Athens, Georgia. And when they say walls of books, they mean walls of books because wow, there were so many options in here. These used bookstores, I really wish I had more time to spend in them because you really can find some gems in here. You just need to be patient and have the time. But I think on this day, we went to 7, whether we went to 6 or 7 bookstores. One day we went to 6 and the next day we went to 7, something like that. So we went to a lot of bookstores this day, and so we didn't have a ton of time to be spending at this bookstore. There was lots of romance options at this bookstore. However, it was just like the way that this bookstore was separated was just fiction and nonfiction. They did have a Christian section, but it was just fiction, and it was like rows and rows and rows of fiction, so you had to look through it for the romance. But they did have some new options, so I ended up getting a box set of The Hobbit and the 3 Lord of the Rings books, and then The Bride by Julie Garwood, and then 2 cowboy romances. I love cowboy romance, what can I say? The last stop for that day was Read It Again in Suwanee, Georgia. We got there right before closing, and this was the same situation. Right when you walk in, it's a bunch of new books, a bunch of new releases, signed copies, that kind of thing. Then if you keep going to the right and to the back, tons of used books. So I ended up getting 2 used books at this bookstore. Rewinding a second, this bookstore had one of my favorite things, and I had not seen it anywhere else. They had a book vending machine. So they had their blind date with the book options in a vending machine that you could get, which I thought was so freaking cool. And then that brings us to the last day of the trip. So we started the day off in Atlanta, Georgia, and we went to Tall Tales Bookshop in Atlanta. The guy that was working at this bookstore was very helpful. We did not spend a lot of time here because we still had quite a few bookstores to go to and to drive back home on this day. At this point, I was on the hunt for the 7-year slip. I really wanted to get it. Kennedy recommended it and said it was so good. I had to read it. So I was really on the hunt for that. They did not have it here. I ended up getting Next of Kin by Hannah Bonham Young. But again, we didn't spend a super long time in this bookstore. Kind of got in, looked around a little bit, got out. That was it. Next up was Eagle Eye Bookshop in Atlanta, Georgia. The front of this bookstore does not look like it goes as far back as it does, but when you walk in, it goes on and on and on. They had a lot of signed copies at this bookstore. They had a Catherine Center book, the newest one that just came out, I'm pretty sure. They had The Honey Witch, they had The Graham Effect, signed by L. Kennedy. They had a lot of signed copies, which was so cool. They had this book that on one side, it was one book, and then when you flip it over, it's another book, and I really wanted to get it just because I liked that you could flip it, but both of the books were on Kindle, so I was like, okay, not today. They had a banned book section, which had caution tape all over it, which I thought was really cute. I really liked that the top of the aisles told you what was in that aisle, kind of like when you go to a grocery store, and they were made to look like street signs. Very cute touch. I got the 7-year slip at this bookstore, and they said that the author was going to be coming and doing a signing for her newest book soon. And I was like, oh, well, I'm from out of town. And they were like, yeah, so if you order on our website, you can order a signed copy, and anything over $10 is free shipping, which of course the book is going to be over $10. So if you are a fan, just so you know, that bookstore does do a lot of signed copies. So you might want to keep your eye on it. Again, this was Eagle Eye Bookshop. Oh my gosh, keep your eye on it. Anyways, next stop in Atlanta was Bookish. And so this bookstore, adorable. Right when you walk in, I went to the left for the fantasy section, and I was making a few laps around the bookstore really looking for the romance books, and I couldn't find any. I was like, man, they just don't have a romance section. Getting closer to the register, right on the right, they have a whole shelf of romance books, and they were organized to make a rainbow, which I don't know if it was for Pride Month or if they have it like that all the time, but I loved it. A unique thing that this bookstore had was they had cross-stitch projects for sale, which as a cross-stitch girly, I was just fangirling a little bit over. The owner here, I'm pretty sure we were talking to the owner. The owner here was so nice. We told her about the bookstore crawl and she was like, I love that for you. She ended up giving me a little sticker. I love it. Continuing to drive south, we ended up in Macon, Georgia. I will say this was my least favorite bookstore of all the bookstores we went to. And I don't know if you know the David Pumpkin sketch from SNL, but when he's like, it's 100 floors of frights, they can't all be winners. That's the idea here. It's 23 bookstores, they can't all be winners. This was definitely my least favorite. They had a sign outside saying like, beware of the blind and deaf cat. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's a little cat in here. So we walk in, it smells like there were 12 cats somewhere in this bookstore. It just like really just smelled like cats lived there. But the other bookstore that had 4 cats, you couldn't tell. I'm just saying. We spent the least amount of time in this bookstore because I was getting a headache in there. We ended up getting a signed cookbook, like a Southern style cookbook for my aunt, and then we just hightailed it out of there. I don't have a ton of footage from this bookstore, so sorry about that. Then we went to Gottwal Books in Warner Robins, Georgia. And so this one, we ended up coming in on the 2nd floor, not knowing that there was a 1st floor. So we're coming in on the 2nd floor, and it's just a bunch of Christian fiction, like lots of Christian fiction, a lot of Bible annotation supplies, like specifically for your Bible, not annotation supplies for other books, Bible carriers. I was like, they're not gonna have the books that I want here. They did have a sci-fi section upstairs as well. So this was a new and used bookstore with mostly used options. And then I saw they had an elevator. So I asked the lady that worked there, I was like, what's downstairs? And she was like, oh, all the fiction's downstairs. And I was like, okay, let's go down there and see what there is to see. Basically, they keep the smut downstairs. And my mom was like, I think it's like a heaven and hell thing. And I was like, yeah, I'm going downstairs. So they had tons and tons of fiction here. I was searching here for a cowboy romance. I'm sorry, there has to be something wrong with me, but I'm not gonna do anything about it. But I was searching for a cowboy romance here. I ended up getting 3 cowboy romances, and I just wish that these used bookstores that I had more time to spend at them. Not that we were rushed or anything, but it's just, you could basically spend an entire day in this bookstore and not look at every single book. The last bookstore I ended up going to with my fiance. My mom had already gone back home to make it 23 bookstores was My Favorite Books in Tallahassee, Florida. It is a used bookstore in Tallahassee. I also don't have a ton of footage from this bookstore because I was really trying to find a book that I wanted to read. They were having a sale for the month of June that was mass market paperbacks were 3 for $6, so of course I had to get 3. I don't make the rules. This was a used bookstore with no new books. I ended up getting 3 Highland themed romances. Very excited about that. I just want to say again, like, I am so thankful to have the mom that I have. Like, I'm so thankful that I got to spend this time with her. I really believe that I have the best mom ever. So sorry to everybody else's moms. But yeah, again, if you wanted to see all the books that I got, as well as books that some friends sent me, check out the birthday book haul. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye.